All right, it's that time. You know the drill. It is time to talk about May anticipated reads. We are here somehow. Now, I would tell you that this month is going to be a little toned down, and we all know that would be a lie. And just the usual caveat that these are a broad swath of books that I personally am excited for, but that I have inevitably forgotten something or will stumble on something the minute I finish recording and be like, why didn't I include that? So let me know what you're excited for as well, whether I talk about it today or not, because as usual, the goal of this video is just to talk about books we're excited for and get things on our radar so that we can read them. So without any further ado, let's talk about the books coming out May 2nd. The first of which that I have on my radar is a debut, The Last Flowers by Sarah Hershon-Rother. This is going to be perfect for my perusal of the blurb for our thriller fans. And actually, we have more books this month for our thriller fans than I think we've had for a second. So I don't know if I'm just in the mood, if these particular thrillers are just scratching that itch for me. I don't know, but there are some thrillers I'm very excited about for this month, this being the first of them. Now, because this is a debut, I don't have any reading history with the author, and it is blurbed as following a librarian who is trying to distract herself from her cancer treatments and a veteran detective on the trail of a cold case. I'm seeing the buzz around it focus a little bit on the fact that both of our investigative leads are women. My admitted reservation with it is that we still have the connection to the police force with our veteran detective. So I'm interested if it's going to explore and complicate both the relationship police forces have with cold cases, complicating kind of investigations from police forces, period, and also kind of complicating and looking at this kind of idea of vigilante justice and the true crime atmosphere, which may be evident in terms of how I've talked about books like I Have Some Questions for You is of interest to me. So admittedly, there are some elements of this that I'm a little on the fence about in terms of how it's presented in the blurb, but I'm definitely going to be paying attention to how people are talking about this and see if it complicates some of those ideas, because there are elements of this that are definitely of interest to me. Now, in terms of kind of mystery thrillers, this does seem like it is falling a little bit more on the procedural mystery side of things, but it is being billed, at least on Goodreads, which is not a be-all end-all indicator of any kind, don't get me wrong, that it is a little bit literary fiction as well. So definitely something I have my eye on, maybe outside a little bit of what I've been reading recently, but definitely of interest. And I will be interested to see if maybe I can get myself back into thrillers a little bit more this year, because it is not my go-to comfort genre necessarily. I enjoy it, but I really got burnt out in a way during the Girl on the Train era because I was reading a lot of them, both because I was legitimately enjoying them and because I was a bookseller at the time and it helped me pair readers with their next read, but also be involved in conversations with customers and readers because I, spoiler alert, enjoy being in conversations about books. So I was reading them to be up on what was going on and because they were fun. But like Chipotle at the same time for me, I just got a little burnt out on it. So I'm definitely interested in dipping my toe back into the mystery thriller space because I have been feeling a little bit left out recently when people are talking about all of the exciting mystery and thrillers that they've been reading. So we'll see how that goes, no promises. And then next we have Warrior Girl on Earth by Angeline Boulley. This is the author of The Firekeeper's Daughter, which I may be the one person on the planet that hasn't read that yet. It's one of those things that got so popular so quickly, I just kind of missed the train and have been waiting for it to come back around. So I need to get a copy for myself because I know I'll love it. But this one I am very, very interested in as well. Now, I have heard people talking about this as a sequel, but because I have not read the first book, I do not know. I have also heard from, I believe, the Novel Neighbor on TikTok, which is one of my favorite bookstores on TikTok, that they can be read independently, so you can read either one first. And I may start with Warrior Girl on Earth. And according to the blurb, Warrior Girl on Earth follows a teen involved in a movement to reclaim the Anishinaabe remains of one of their ancestors from a museum. And this ancestor, dubbed Warrior Girl, has been held onto by the museum despite federal laws that allow tribes to request the remains of their ancestors due to technicalities and loopholes. And so our protagonist in this book becomes involved and centered on the fight to reclaim their ancestor from this museum. And I think that this is really tapping into a lot of very important conversations we're having right now, especially in terms of museums and museum curation and where a lot of the things in museums have have come from. And I think that this is an especially important conversation around our Indigenous communities. So while I'm really drawn to the central concept and idea that is stated and explored in the blurb, I obviously know this author is incredibly popular for a reason. So I also expect this to be a really dynamic coming of age story, but based on everything I've heard about the Firekeeper's Daughter, this is definitely one to have on the TBR, and so that is why this is here. Now, moving back into the thrillerish space, but YA, Lying in the Deep by Diana Urban. Now, admittedly, thrillers have been super hot in YA the last couple of years, and I know that I really haven't been as knowledgeable in that area, but this one is definitely of interest. The cover is striking, if borderline a little kitschy. The cover is also reminding me a little bit of the book Haunting in the Deep by Adriana Mather, which is not at all the same in the sense that it is the second in the How to Hang a Witch series and is about the Salem witch trials and the ancestors of the Salem witch trials in the current day. And this is a thriller about a semester at sea and murders that start happening on this semester at sea. So truly a horrifying nightmare scenario, right? You are trapped in the middle of the ocean on a boat, which is already creepy enough. This idea of the vast expanse all around you. Like, there's a reason my book club enjoys boat books. But then on top of that, you are trapped in the middle of nowhere on the ocean, and there is a killer on the loose, and you're a teenager also trying to deal with school and the politics of school. I just can't even imagine. I'm sure this will be incredibly fun, especially for teen readers. I did see someone review it as kind of a Death on the Nile for teens. I admittedly haven't read any Agatha Christie, so I cannot speak to that personally, but definitely seems like it's going to be a lot of fun for our thriller fans, and I think perfectly primed for the kind of summer months, especially with that boat setting. So something to keep your eye on, something I'm keeping my eye on, we'll see. And then we have what I would argue is one of the most anticipated releases of the month, Chain Gang All-Stars by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah. This is the author of the fabulous short story collection, Friday Black, and so I am so excited to see how that style that I know from the short stories translates to a full-length novel, and this has been getting a lot of seemingly well-deserved buzz. This follows two women who are basically gladiators in the American prison system in this slightly left of reality dystopia that feels a little closer to our reality than it probably should. And so it's a little bit Hunger Games, a little bit Gladiator, as mentioned. It seems like it's going to be searing and insightful and inventive, and also based on his short stories, I wouldn't be surprised if it was also a little bit funny, but in a dark humor kind of way. So this is definitely one I have my eye on. I am a little bit regretting not buying it because it was out a little bit early on Indie Bookstore Day at one of the stores and I should have grabbed it, but I was being good and it wouldn't count toward list sales anyway, so definitely one I'm going to want to snap up and read soon. And I definitely think, as mentioned, that this is going to be a huge book this year, and I'm very excited, as previously stated, to see how this author's style translates from short story to long form novel in the same way that I was so excited to see how Mariana Enriquez translated from short story to long form novel. So this year is really being good to me in terms of short story authors that I really enjoyed, in that vein of like weird short stories that I love coming out with full-length novels. So we'll see if I love this one just as much as I loved Our Share of Night, and I anticipate being just as disturbed, just in slightly different ways. And then we have Home Buddies by Tembi Denton Hurst, which is another book that I'm really excited for, kind of like the kernel of exploration in it as much as anything. It follows a young woman who loses her coveted media job, and in the wake of this loss pens a really searing manifesto about the racism, especially in the industry, and what it means to be a young Black woman in the space, in the media space. But while presumably cathartic, this gets no traction for her, and so she finds herself kind of having to go back home and kind of rediscover herself, and is kind of settling in a way back home in a way that she didn't anticipate being able to settle, until her letter resurfaces because of a media scandal, and then she's kind of thrust back into the spotlight, and suddenly everyone wants to hear her ideas around this. And so I'm very interested for the conversation, especially that this is going to be having around media, and how media kind of takes talent, eats it up, and spits it out. I think that we've been seeing this a lot recently with all of the media closures, especially at places like BuzzFeed, which which as a consumer I could perceive as these incubators of talent and this place for these big up-and-coming voices. But I also recognized as a consumer and just a person on the internet that it was also a very demanding and toxic workplace that really took advantage of its creatives and its talent. So I'm thinking that this will explore a lot of tangential things, and I'm very interested in conversations, especially around fields like media, theater, the arts, where there is this perception of you should be grateful for what you have, and there's also this perception of cultural influence or some kind of influence, and a lot of that is used to undermine its workers and to take advantage of people because you're passionate about it, right? And because of these structures, there's a lot of inherent racism and blindness to privilege. So I don't know, we'll see. We'll have that conversation after we read the book. I will pull myself in, rein myself in from that preemptive conversation. And then moving on, we have Clytemnestra. This is a debut, and a debut that has been getting a lot of marketing push from what I've seen. I've seen people get PR packages for this on TikTok, and it is, of course, a retelling of Clytemnestra. Well, maybe not of course. Maybe it would be a reference, but it is a retelling of Clytemnestra. So I'm very interested to see what this ends up being. We know that Greek retellings are incredibly popular right now, but I would argue we've also been seeing a little bit more saturation in that niche, in that market. So based on some of the retellings that I've read that I've admittedly been a little disappointed by in comparison to Madeline Miller, I'm very interested to see what this is, how this performs, what the voice on this looks like. But based on the marketing push, it seems like the publisher is really behind this title, really believes in this title. So I'm interested, I guess, and not to be shady and not to discredit this author's work, whether that push is based on their confidence in the voice of this title and in this title on its own, or as part of the larger zeitgeist and trends towards retellings. Though we've seen a lot of retellings come out recently without this kind of marketing push, to my kind of anecdotal observation, so we'll see. So very excited about this, especially because this is again that kind of twisting and reclaiming of someone that in mythology is traditionally considered a villain. So very interested to see what this is going to be. And then to get us in a little bit of the summer romance mood, we have I Like Me Better by Robbie Weber. This follows a teen soccer star, Zach, who takes the fall for a prank that he was not involved in for the rest of his team. And due to this, he's on community service and gets a little bit of a crush on the new intern Chip. However, Chip believes he was involved in this prank and so is not interested in him. And so presumably Zach has to find himself a little bit on the way to also finding love. And then don't worry, I didn't forget about The Sun and the Star by Rick Riordan and Mark Oshiro, though do I really need to tell you that we are getting the Nico D'Angelo story. This is also a reminder to me that I need to finish the last book in the Apollo series. I am way behind. But like everyone else, I am definitely anticipating this installment. I think it was so smart of Rick Riordan to pair up with Mark Oshiro for this novel, and I am both excited and reticent because we need conflict for books, and so I am absolutely anticipating getting my heart torn out by this. So very excited to see what this is going to be. Percy Jackson fans are undoubtedly going to be having a great year, and honestly, hopefully the show will help make up for some of the inevitable heartbreak from this book. So let's all get ready to be emotionally devastated and see it on the other side, I guess. And then I only have one book on my radar for May 9th, but it is a retelling that I have been begging for years, and that is Scarlet by Genevieve Cogman, which is a reimagining of the Scarlet Pimpernel, but not just the Scarlet Pimpernel with vampires. And hopefully vampires that feel a little bit more aligned with House of Hunger in terms of its kind of intrigue and tension, or even just a little campier maybe. I don't know, but I am excited. I admittedly am not sure about the vampire element because I have been wanting the Scarlet Pimpernel element for so long. So we'll see how they combine together, but I am undoubtedly excited for a Scarlet Pimpernel retelling. We love a little bit of intrigue. We love a foppish rake as a distraction tool, and we'll see what we get here. And then moving on to May 16th, we have The True Love Experiment by Christina Lauren. Now, as I've said in the past, Christina Lauren is really hit or miss for me, admittedly, but they are a beloved romance duo, and so undeniably this is going to be a very buzzy book, and I'm very interested in this one because it follows an incredibly popular romance novelist at the height of her career who admittedly hasn't found love for herself, and she somehow gets teamed up with a producer for a reality show who needs a new hit and sees the potential in doing a dating show, pairing up someone whose whole career is based on love and finding them love. Now, I think we can all anticipate where the love will be found there, but I'm excited to see how it goes. And based on the blurb, this is a character that readers of the Soulmate Equation, which I admittedly haven't read yet, will recognize and have been excited for. So we love getting a fan favorite character in their own book, for sure. And then we have Venom and Vow by Anna Marie McLemore and Elliot McLemore. This is very anticipated, not just for its content, but because this is the first book that Anna Marie McLemore is penning with their spouse. And it is also kind of a deviation in that it's a little bit of a higher fantasy out of McLemore than we have seen before. So it follows a transgender prince who is stepping in and doubling for his brother, as well as a lady-in-waiting who doubles as an assassin who is out to kill the prince that everyone thinks is the prince, but is actually dueling his brother, who is doubling as the prince. So lots of opportunity for mistaken identity, for angst, for this kind of reveal of identity. Additionally, with the lady-in-waiting doubling as an assassin, we have a little bit of that kind of vigilante identity that I really enjoy, which reminds me I need to read the sequel to Mask of Mirrors. But I really enjoy McLemore's voice, especially in their fantasy elements, and so I'm very interested to see how this is going to translate to a more traditional fantasy, so to speak, because McLemore usually leans in to the kind of fantastical elements in the everyday in their work as I have read it, and so it's a different kind of avenue, and of course then we have this new partnership. So very excited for this one, and we love when authors try new things. And then does it really need introduction? We have Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. This is undoubtedly going to be one of the other really big books of the month, probably of the year. This is seemingly moving us out of the high fantasy realms that readers know Kuang for most directly and into kind of this literary intrigue where these two authors are friends and one has developed a lot more success than the other. In June, one of the friends starts to resent her other friend Athena's success a little bit, but she also starts to believe that her lack of success is because she's a white woman and nobody wants to hear from white women anymore. So when Athena suddenly passes away, June steals her manuscript, passes it off as her own, and creates this ambiguous persona and pen name, setting herself up as an Asian woman. So this is directly engaging in a lot of conversations that are happening, especially in the literary world right now. I'm sure we'll see some more American Dirt discourse pop up because of this, though at this point, because I just mentioned it, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? I'm really interested in addition to the cultural exploration and of course seeing Kuang branch out into a new avenue, because I've loved everything that she's written previously, is the idea that this is being told in the first person. So in theory, we are being put in the head of the villain, so to speak, of the piece. And I think that that's really inventive in a lot of ways. Now, to be clear, I have not read this book yet. I didn't get any advanced reader copies. I didn't seek any out. So I will be reading this right along with everyone else, but I'm very interested to see what this first person does for the story, especially because I don't think Babel had any first person to my recollection, and I definitely don't think there was any in the Poppy War, because that was a more traditional high fantasy, although also the most boundary pushing and freshest high fantasy I had personally read in a long time, and I love that series as much as it emotionally wrecked me. So just very interested to see what we're gonna get here, and also maybe a little in awe and a little scared of Kuang for how quickly she is pushing out these really masterful works. So we'll see, but I also think it will be really perfectly primed for summer with that kind of tongue-in-cheek, presumably a little sarcastic literary thriller bend to it. So very interested to see what this is and how it is perceived more broadly by readers. So we'll definitely have that very high on our list, don't worry. And then we have The Disenchantment by Celia Bell, which I admittedly don't know a whole lot about, except it takes place in 17th century France and follows a young noblewoman who is not fulfilled and happy in her day-to-day life and finds herself in these kinds of salons and artist spaces and just in the kind of cultural counterculture in a way that we would think of the city and society at the time. And she falls in love with one of the women that she meets in these spaces. And so I am, of course, very interested in both the exploration of these spaces and these historical spaces, the kind of queering of history, because we know that queer people have always existed, so getting to explore those stories, and admittedly a little hesitant because it does mention that one of our protagonists, one of our romantic leads, is involved in a murder in a kind of fit of passion, so to speak, or a moment of passion, so kind of indicating it's not premeditated at least, but then keeping me as a reader on their side. I will be interested to see how that goes, but I am interested enough in the atmosphere, in the setting of this place, and some of its other explorations that I definitely still think I'm going to give this a go, especially because I am likely to be pleasantly surprised. And then we have Quietly Hostile, the new essay collection by Samantha Irby. I am 100% going to do this on audio because I believe that that is the best way to experience a Samantha Irby essay collection. So the experiencing is the main part. You should absolutely, if you haven't somehow read any of Samantha Irby's essay collections, definitely pick them up. They are funny, they are relatable even when they shouldn't be, they stay grounded, and they are also kind of a larger exploration of both the incredibly personal and larger cultural things at the same time. And if you are new to audiobooks or trying to get into audiobooks for the first time, I would definitely recommend her work because I personally got into audiobooks first by listening to funnier books or comedy books, and these are definitely essays that are meant to be funny, and the way she reads them is incredibly funny. So if you need something to help ease you into audiobooks, this is the thing. And then we have The Enchanted Hacienda by J.C. Cervantes, and this is following a young woman without magic going back to her magical home. So there is a little bit of Encanto vibes here, but I, of course, love a magical house. And I'm excited because this seems to be an enchanted house outside of where we've been kind of living recently in terms of gothic or haunted. This seems to be, or I am anticipating this to be, a little bit more magical realism, so we'll see, but I'm very excited. And of course, I will not be disappointed if we get a little bit of a gothic sprinkle, but I'm excited about this. Honestly, the title is all I needed, and I've been seeing it mentioned, especially by creators I trust on TikTok, so this is already on hold at the library, don't you worry. Then we have The Guest by Emma Cline, which I believe is her first book since The Girls, which was a huge book when it came out. And to date it a little bit, The Girls was my first post on Blitsy, and that obviously followed a kind of fictionalized accounting of the Manson murders. This follows a young woman who is kicked out of her boyfriend's East End Long Island home, and she spends the weekend kind of moving from place to place on Long Island. So it feels like it has a little bit of that element that we were seeing, especially at the beginning of the year, releases at the beginning of the year, of someone kind of fitting in a social circle or kind of presenting in a social circle that isn't necessarily their normal. So it's definitely seeming to be an exploration of class and identity and image, and the blurb specifically mentions a mutability of morality, which is just a fabulous phrase, so good job whoever came up with that one, and that I think is what aligns us most closely to the explorations in The Girls, or what ties it back to her work as I know it. So I will be very interested to see what this looks like, what this is. It admittedly does, to my first kind of look and perusal on Goodreads, have a kind of mixed rating and reviews as of now, but I'm also wondering if that's because, one, we have waited so long since The Girls came out, so there is a lot of anticipation and hype and expectation there, and also because of that wait and because of how popular The Girls was, if this is different, which it does seem like it's going to be, there may be some disappointment from readers who were expecting it to be another The Girls. So we'll see what it does end up being. And then we have Painted Devils by Margaret Owen, which is the sequel to Little Thieves, and about the extent of my knowledge on that book. I tried to buy Little Thieves on Indie Bookstore Day. I thought the paperback had come out. Maybe I was wrong. I could not find it anywhere. So it may be in that in-between where the paperback is coming out soon and so all the hardcovers have been pulled, or it was just completely sold out everywhere because I definitely looked in stores that I know stocked it previously. So I will eventually read Little Thieves so then I can then read Painted Devils. But for those of you who have been looking forward to the sequel, here you go. And then moving on to May 23rd, we still have 2 more release weeks because this may be the month that never ends. We have On the Nature of Magic by Marianne Womack. Now, I admittedly don't know much about this author, if anything. I don't admittedly know much about the publisher here either, I don't think, and I haven't really heard anyone talking about this book. But when I saw it and looked at the blurb, one, it's set in 1902, which is kind of a sweet spot for me historically. It also mentions someone seeing the ghost of Marie Antoinette. So while I think based on the blurb, it's going to focus a little bit more on magic and the filmmaker who made the movie, I think, about the moon. You know the one, the first movie about the moon. All of that sounds great. What I care about is the ghost of Marie Antoinette. If you can hear weird noises at any point, I apologize. They are working on the plumbing in my building, and this is the time I've got to get this done. Next, we have The Chateau by Jacqueline Goldis, which I am anticipating being perfect for fans of Ruth Ware and thrillers that focus on groups of women and female friendships and relationships. And it follows a group of women who return to the chateau they spent a lot of time at when studying abroad because it was owned or is owned by the grandmother of one of their group. And so the grandmother invites them all back to the chateau like 20 years later. And in coming back, it unearths a lot of their group dynamic and the way things have shifted and maybe some resentments that have lingered from the past. And then the grandmother dies, and we can assume, based on the fact that this is a thriller, that it's not necessarily by natural means. And in combination with this, an Instagram account appears that is revealing some of this friend group's more intimate moments and is threatening to reveal even more. And I do love the kind of social media angle with this. I'm very interested to see what layer that adds, and this kind of threat of public reveal while also playing into this idea of how we present publicly versus personally, and the kind of intrusion of seeing our most private selves revealed publicly in some ways. So I'm very interested in the exploration here of that, as well as the female friendships and dynamics, as well as the setting in France. So I honestly anticipate this being a really hot thriller this summer. And then we have The Real Americans by Brandon Taylor. This is his second novel following real life. We of course got a short story collection like a year or two ago at this point, so I am very much anticipating this, especially because it seems to be returning to his kind of artistic wheelhouse in that it is set in Iowa and it follows a group of friends over the course of, I believe, a year, according to the blurb. And we do have a former dancer as part of this friend group, which harkens back to his short story collection. I may need to go back and see if it may have been a character in his short story collection, because we did have some interconnected short stories in that connection kind of framing everything. But Taylor does so well with this kind of deep character study, this kind of exploration of stillness and place, and the way that place and the Midwest in particular feels like a character in his books and in his stories. I'm very excited to see how that's going to translate here and how it's going to translate to an exploration of a group over a longer period of time, because in real life we saw a real distilled kind of weekend, holiday weekend. And so there is a lot more opportunity for things to kind of simmer in different ways here. That being said, the tension that Taylor built even over the course of a weekend was incredibly anxiety-inducing at some points. So the idea of what he could build over this kind of slower burn is a little intimidating, I'm not gonna lie. I think if you like Sally Rooney and that kind of depth of character study, as well as also kind of looking at the zeitgeist of a generation, so to speak, and just kind of culture and the world around us and how that acts on us as individuals and what have you, like I said, just a kind of deeper cultural study and character study, this will be right up your alley. And I admittedly debated that comparison due to Sally Rooney's popularity. However, Brandon Taylor is also popular, I would argue, and two, he has reviewed at least one Sally Rooney for a major publication. So I definitely think that they are running in similar spaces in terms of the voice of their work, the tone of their work, and what their work seeks to explore, while still being vastly different authors and incredible talents in their own right. And then we have, and I'm going to read this off because it's one of those long nonfiction titles, On Our Best Behavior, The 7 Deadly Sins, and the Price Women Pay to Be Good by Elise Lonan. This is a kind of feminist exploration of how women have molded their behaviors in kind of contrast to the 7 deadly sins and what it means to be moral and good in your behavior as a woman, and just kind of the higher standard or double standard in some ways that women are held to in terms of their behavior. So I love a cultural exploration. It definitely feels like it's going to tie into some of those historical explorations as well, or being able to trace the roots of things. So I'm definitely interested in this one, and another one I will probably do on audio. And with that, we are to May 30th, the last new release Tuesday of the month, and maybe more importantly for me personally, the week I will see Taylor Swift in concert. However, don't let the end of the month fool you. They are, of course, going to slip in a bunch of new releases under the wire. So the first we've got is The Benevolent Society of Ill-Mannered Ladies by Alison Goodman. This seems to be the start of a new historical mystery series, and what I'm really drawn to in this is that, one, I believe it follows a protagonist in her 40s, and it is a protagonist who is using her kind of identity as an old maid by society's standards to help her in her investigations, because she's more unassuming in public spaces. People are kind of overlooking her or ignoring her, and she is using that to her advantage. And our investigative duo here appears to be a pair of sisters. So we've got a kind of twist on our spinster sisters trope. Now, you may or may not be saying, Melody, didn't you hold on to Girl Waits with Gun and not read it for years, despite the fact that it seemingly explored similar tropes? Yes, you've admittedly got me there, but the historical setting here seems to be a little bit more up my alley than the World War I setting of that series. Additionally, even though we are setting up these sisters as spinsters, their case in this book seems to be kind of rehabilitating the image of a former acquaintance who was committed of a crime and sent to Australia, and he comes back into their life many years later in the midst of a carriage heist. So part of me wonders and admittedly hopes if there may be a little bit of a romantic angle there as well, especially if we set this up kind of long term, so maybe a slow burn. But I admittedly have been interested in romances with older leads, with people who are more established with themselves and their world, and they kind of meet together on equal footing in some ways. So we'll see what we get here. And then we have another nonfiction title that I'm going to read off because of the long secondary title, Hey Hun, Sales, Sisterhood, Supremacy, and the Other Lies Behind Multi-Level Marketing by Emily Lynn Paulson. And I would formally like to apologize to my friend group for the person I will be after reading this book and how probably annoying and insufferable I will be about it. However, to be fair, I've been kind of annoying and insufferable about explorations of multi-level marketing for years before this book. That's part of the reason I wanted my book club to read Cultish, because I think MLMs are this really fascinating kind of convergence between cult and scam. And I want to be clear, having seen people I really care about and like and respect in my personal life drawn into some of these companies, that I am not judging the people involved, especially if you are just kind of a more basic consultant. But it's really fascinating watching the different cultures of these companies. I remember when I was laid off in 2018, while I think I only had one person directly try to recruit me for an MLM, and they were very respectful about it and only asked me once. And in many ways, I have been very lucky compared to a lot of people in terms of not getting as many cold pitches for MLMs from strangers on the internet. Maybe that says more about how I am perceived online than anything, I don't know. But I remember telling my friends in 2018 that what I wasn't prepared for in the job hunt was how much of the job hunt was going to be dodging scams. Now, admittedly and thankfully, this go around, I haven't had the same experience. It's been rough for other reasons, don't get me wrong, but I at least haven't been almost caught in lots of different multi-level marketing scams, knock on wood. So I'm really excited to see what this book has to say, to have another resource. I, of course, listened to the Dream podcast way back in the day. I do admittedly watch anti-MLM content here on YouTube, so I'm just fascinated by this subculture, and I am very interested to see what perspective this book is going to bring. And based again on only anecdotal observation, I believe there are a lot of other people that are anticipating this title for the same reason. So I'm very excited to dig into this one, potentially talk about this one, but trust that I will not be sliding into your DMs to discuss it. And then if you loved the young adult romance from Talia Hibbert earlier this year and have been eagerly hoping for another popular adult romance author to break into the young adult romance space, have I got the book for you? We are getting Her Good Side by popular romance author Rebecca Weatherspoon, author of Zenny and Rafe, and that cowboy trilogy I need to read because I do trust her to be the exception to my I don't like cowboys rule. See, just exceptions all over the place. But this is a young adult fake dating romance. It looks cute, it looks fun. I trust Weatherspoon's voice and I'm excited. And I just think it's going to be a perfect YA romance for the summer. And then on the other side of the spectrum though, we have Beware the Woman by Megan Abbott. I am admittedly behind on my Megan Abbott reading, but I have loved Megan Abbott since she debuted. So although I haven't read her releases the last couple of years, again behind and was a little burnt out on thrillers probably, I am intrigued for this one. One, because it feels a little different somehow. It's following a pregnant woman who goes with her new husband to visit her in-laws in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And when they get to this cabin, this cottage, she has a health scare. And so in light of this health scare, a lot of their plans are completely scrapped, as well as conversations around her husband's dead mother start kind of coming back up, and there's a lot of mystery surrounding it. And on top of this, our protagonist's every move is under surveillance, and there's just this sense of being trapped. And I think that this is a very interesting and prescient, well, actually probably not prescient. This is probably directly in reaction to the conversations we've seen taking place around women's bodies and the lack of control and autonomy that we are seeing women have over their bodies and how they are being treated as vessels instead of as humans. And I think that this is going to be a kind of thriller horror look into that reality and that space, made even more horrific by the fact that it is so many women's realities. And then if we need to escape that reality for a bit, no judgment, because it is largely our reality in many places, we have Once More with Feeling by Alyssa Sussman. This is the new romance from the author of Funny You Should Ask, which I admittedly still haven't read, though I own it. And this follows a former pop star who had a very high-profile romance with a member of a popular boy band until she was caught in a moment of infidelity with another member of that band, and her whole kind of empire came crashing down. And we're picking back up in the aftermath in the future when she is invited to be part of a Broadway show by the man she was caught in a compromising position with. And the conceit of this seems to be, over the course of working on the show together, we have some showmance vibes, they get closer, some backstage romance, if you will. Now, I find this interesting for a couple of reasons. The biggest really is that Broadway is where you go after you've failed at like this pop stardom career, which I know that we have lots of conversations and should be having lots of conversations about stunt casting on Broadway, but Broadway is incredibly hard to break into. It's not the thing you just kind of stumble upon. Well, I guess we're seeing some people stumble upon. I'm interested in how this conversation is going to go. I'm also very interested in if the theatrical elements of this will be true enough to life that it won't completely pull me out. I just need one stage manager that's completely over everyone's shit and we should be okay. But I'm interested to see how this is going to resonate for someone with at least a tangential connection, a degree if nothing else, in theater, though I have never been on Broadway or connected to Broadway, to be absolutely clear, though I am very, very proud of all of my friends and peers who have been. And then we have Witch King by Martha Wells, who is popular for Murderbot, which I have not read, and I am admittedly kind of hazy on what this book is going to be about. It seems like it's obviously going to be a fantasy, but involves a mage and someone that's murdered and their consciousness being held on to. Honestly, reading the blurb may be the best route here. It says, Kai is having a long day in Martha Wells's Witch King. After being murdered, his consciousness, dormant and unaware of the passing of time, while confined in an elaborate water trap, Kai wakes to a lesser mage attempting to harness Kai's magic to his own advantage. That was never going to go well. But why was Kai imprisoned in the first place? What has changed in the world since his assassination? And why does the Rising World Coalition appear to be growing in influence? Kai will need to pull his allies close and draw on all his pain magic if he is to answer even the least of these questions. He's not going to like the answers. So it tells us some things and nothing all at the same time, and maybe it would be a little easier if I had more familiarity with this author's work. I don't know if this has any connection to anything else she's written, but I am intrigued by this idea, especially of stolen consciousness, so may go ahead and give it a whirl. And then we have Deep as the Sky, Red as the Sea by Rita Chang Epig, which is following a legendary Chinese pirate queen, which is all I need. We've got pirates, we've got boats, presumably because of the pirates, and based on the blurb, we're going to have a lot of political intrigue and machinations and maneuvering, and presumably the idea of how gender plays into all of that and how she built her empire. What I'm really intrigued by in the blurb, outside of all of these things that are absolutely selling the book to me, is a comp to Piranesi. Because when I think pirates, pirate queens, pirate empires, the sea, when I think of all of that, I don't necessarily think of a liminal labyrinth as kind of like a holding place and a little bit of psychological torture. So I'd be very interested to see what is bringing about that comparison. And between that comp and a comp to the Night Tiger, I am also interested if there's going to be a little bit of a magical or supernatural element to this at all. And then we have Threads That Bind by Kika Hatsapolo, which I believe is a young adult murder mystery, fantasy murder mystery, following young women who are the fates. Basically, in every generation, the fates are born. And so we do have that kind of mythological connection, but it also seems to be taking place in a slightly alternate kind of fantasy reality. So our protagonist has these powers in combination to her relation to the fates that she uses as a private investigator. So we definitely have that mystery component. And according to the blurb, there is also going to be a little bit of romance sprinkled in as well. It does mention soulmates, so I'm very interested in how it does that because it makes sense within the concept of the fates, this idea that you know the string of someone's life, but I will be interested to know how it's executed. So surprise, surprise, I've got my eye on that one. And then last, but certainly not least, we have An Island Princess Starts a Scandal by Adriana Herrera, and it follows Manuela from book one as she is kind of embarking on this last hurrah of freedom before she is set to enter an arranged marriage that she does not want. And part of this last hurrah involves her connecting with this duchess who wants a parcel of Manuela's land, but she doesn't want to sell. sell, except she makes a deal. If the Duchess kind of shows her around Paris, kind of facilitates part of this last hurrah, Manuela will hand over or sell this land. But this is a romance, and so of course the relationship between Manuela and the Duchess is surely not going to be that cut and dry, and I am so excited for it. And I am excited because we are surely going to find out what happened in book 1 when Manuela went upstairs, and I would be willing to bet the Duchess is involved in some way. So we'll see if this passion and connection can survive past this one last summer, but I am willing, especially in a romance, to place my bets on love, and I am so excited to dive into this book, and I'm very excited because I am sure my romance book club will inevitably read this one. We've been excited about it, especially based on how much we loved A Caribbean Heiress in Paris, and if anyone wanted to make a series out of this series, we personally would not say no. I'm speaking on behalf of all of us in this moment. So that is May. A lot, I know. We've got a big month, as always, at this point, but let me know what you're excited about. Let me know if anything I'm excited about, you are also excited about. Thanks for hanging out and listening to what I'm excited about. Like and subscribe if you feel like it. Read something good, and yeah, bye.